Hey everybody, welcome back, welcome into the studio. We are on day 8 of this Voron 0.2 build. We're getting to the point now where I have to actually look back at the number of videos to figure out which day we're on because I've lost track. But today we are going to work on wiring up and then installing the heated bed on this printer. So this is where we left off from yesterday. We have the belts all done, so the X and Y axis motion is all in place. The only thing I've done since the last video is I went ahead and trimmed the excess belt here down almost flush, not totally flush. Once I got the tension right and I was happy with that, I went ahead and trimmed that down. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to trim it even more so that it's completely flush with this plastic part here when we go to install the print head later on. I think that'll probably be tomorrow, but for now we're just going to leave it like that, and that gets the excess belts out of the way for what we're going to do today, working down here with our Kirigami bed mod. This is the holder that this LDO kit came with for the bed. It's not the standard Voron one, and because of that I am going to sort of rearrange the order of the instructions here. We'll still be following the instructions and I'll pop them up on the screen when it is time, you know, when it makes sense to do so. But for the first part of this, I'm gonna shift things around a bit. We're gonna wire up the wires to the bed first, run them through the cable chain to the area down below, and then get that all cleaned up, and then we'll go ahead and put together and install the bed on top of here. So that's a little bit different from the standard order that the Voron instructions want you to do. But I think this will work out better. And so what I've got here are these wires, which I know need to go up through our cable chain and to this bed. And there are 3 of them, right? This one is for the bed thermistor. This one here is for the bed heater. And then this one here is for the NeoPixel LED that's on the front of the bed holder here. And so what we're going to do is, I guess, start with these 2 because they actually connect in on the underside of this. And getting a view of this for the camera is going to be kind of difficult. I'll try to crank this bed all the way up to its highest position so that there's some clearance here. So you can see here we've got our little connector block that we already installed. This was back in one of the first days of the build. And so what we need to do is just connect in our bed heater and our bed thermistor into these Wago connectors for the bed heater, and then there's a little JST connector back here that's in the dark that you probably can't see for the thermistor connection. And we'll just go ahead and connect those in place here. So I'm going to do that now. The other ends of these wires all have, they're labeled. They came from the LDO kit labeled, so you can see this little white tag here, but they left the actual JST connector off of it. So the pins are already crimped. We just have to connect the connector into place. And I'm sure that they did that so that it would be easier for us to feed these down through the cable chain, because if you had the connector on there, that would be not ideal for feeding through the cable chain. So on this one, the bed heater, I'm going to put the labeled side down through the cable chain so that it'll be, you know, visible on the other end, the label. And so I'm going to use this end of the cable here to connect these into here. So we'll just put one into one of these Wago connectors and then the other end into the other one. Those are in there nice and solid. So we've got those. And I think for all of these cables, I'm going to run them up and around. So we're going to run them up underneath the bed like so. And we're going to tie them together here and then run them back this way through this cable channel. At least that is my current plan. We'll see how that works out. But first, we need to deal with this final connector for the NeoPixel LED. Now this one is a 3-wire connection, and the wires matter, right? Because one's neutral, one is power, and one is probably the data signal. And they have actually, on the other end of this cable, labeled them, sort of labeled them. They've marked them at least with a red tag and a white tag, and then just nothing on this one. And so what I did already ahead of time is I grabbed the other end of the connector and I taped it on this card here, and then I labeled here red, white, and black so that in the future when we go to put this connector on the other end, before we do our wiring, I know which one needs to be where. So I'm going to set that connector off to the side, all labeled and ready to go, and then we're going to plug this in up here. And again, this is going to run back that way. And so I think what I would like to do is just kind of tie all these wires together right here and then run them back through there. Yeah. So I'm going to grab a zip tie. I don't remember if the LDO kit came with its own zip ties. This is one from my own collection, so this might be something that I'm using that's not standard with the kit. And I'm going to just feed it around here like so, and use it to tie these wires in place, because we don't want them you know, popping up away from this base and then running into the underside of the heated bed. That could damage them over time, so we want to keep them away from the heater as best we can. And also try to keep them nice and tidy at the same time. So that looks good. We'll snip off the excess of this zip tie. And now we have this nice little bundle of wires that needs to run through this channel that they've given us as part of the bed here. So we'll do that. Very nice. Yeah, that's nice and clean. All of these are going to stay away from the heater, no problem. And then we need to go into the top of this cable chain right here. I guess actually we come in from the bottom, and then we've got to feed these through the cable chain itself. So what I'm going to do is grab the other end of these somewhere down here, actually maybe a couple spots along here, and I'm just going to use these pieces of masking tape to hold this together for a little while here. That'll make it easier for us to run this through our cable chain. And looking at this cable chain, it is different from the one on my big Voron in that there is no opening here. So the big Voron had, like, all of these links had a little hinged part. You could open this completely up and then just lay the cable in and snap it in place. This one is all enclosed. So we're going to definitely have to run the cables through here, like fish them through. I don't think it'll be that bad because there aren't that many of them. But we'll see. So I want to make sure I've oriented this the correct way. So this is our top of our cable chain here, and it's going to face that direction. So I'm just going to fish these through, and then when they come out the other side, we will go ahead and put the cable chain into place. Alright, so with the cables all through the chain, we can now take this piece of masking tape off. That was just to hold everything in place. And that's looking good. Okay, so now I'm going to, I'll try to turn it this way so maybe the camera can see this. I'm going to run these cables down to here and then up through there. And then that's where the chain starts. So we'll snap the chain into place like this. So it'd be easier if the bed was not all the way up. So let me move it down a bit here. All right, and to hold these in place, I'm gonna put one more zip tie kind of right around there. If I can find another zip tie, yes I can. Okay. Yep, that seems real good right there. Nice, okay. So there's the beginning of our cable chain, and then the other end of it, we are gonna fish all these cables. Try to get this on camera. We're gonna fish them down and through this hole. down here. And then we can just snap this end of the cable chain in place. Impossible for me to get a good angle for the camera with that and also be able to actually reach in there and apply the correct force to snap that in place, so I've got to turn it this way. Apologies for that. All right, I'm going to pull the slack through now and then make sure that it's all snugged up here at the top, and I'm going to re-snap this top end of the chain in place. It actually came out when I was moving things around. I think that it hadn't actually been snapped in place tightly the first time that we did it. So this is better. And so there's everything ready to go, nice and clean. Now in the instructions, which I will show you here, they remind us that, I think on one of these pages, yeah, that when the bed is all the way up at the top, so I'm going to spin this screw and get this all the way to the top, you need to make sure that your cable chain is short enough so that you've got clearance here, that it's not, that the x-axis is going to be able to pass over the top of it, right? If you've got too long of a chain, it'll be looping up higher and it might get in the way there. There needs to be enough clearance. The LDO kit itself came with 2 extra links for the cable chain that were not attached to the chain. So that chain was put together the way that you saw it out of the bag. But these 2 extra links were in the bag with it, I guess in case you need them, but I think that they've already preset it to the right length, because at least for me, that is the perfect length to not be too tall there. Yeah, so we're good. I'm gonna roll this down just a little bit, just to kind of put it more in the middle of the bed to make it easier to work with. And then the other end of these cables is all underneath the printer now, and we can just tuck those out of the way. We'll need them at some point in the future, but not right now. And so what we've got left is to go back, and let me find the correct page in the instructions. Okay, so we're joining back with where we left off yesterday in the instructions, and this is the beginning of how to install the print bed, although we've already got the wiring ready to go. So we skipped this step with the LDO kit because instead of using these 3D printed thumb screws, the LDO kit came with its own metal ones. So there's no need to do those and put those heat set inserts in place. Similarly here, we do need to put the magnetic sheet on, but the heater bed, the heater pad that goes underneath all of these pages here, we're going to skip because our bed came with the heater pre-installed already on the bottom, right? So we'll go to this page here. I have already cleaned this with isopropyl alcohol, and so our adhesive should be ready to go here with our magnet. So this magnetic sheet, what I'm going to do is pull off a little bit and like fold this down. This is going to be a whole lot easier to do on this very small bed than it would have been on you know, a much larger one, but basically what I want to do is get this centered on here. So I'm going to lay it down like this until I'm happy with how it is centered, and then I'm going to press that side down that I pulled the backing paper off of to get it started, and then I can reach under here and just pull the rest of this paper out and then smooth it down. Very nice. All right, now one extra step with this pre-installed heating pad, the thermistor connection actually just screws right here into the middle. So I'm going to hand tighten this, and I don't know if I need to tighten it more than that. We'll see what it feels like here. Yeah, so I have this very large pair of pliers here. I'm just going to give this a tiny bit of an extra turn just to snug it down. All right, that seems good. All right, so that is our bed thermistor, and it is labeled as well. All of these cables pretty much in this kit are labeled, which is very nice, makes it easy to remember what's what when you go to plug everything together. All right, so next they show you here on this page of the instructions, page 147 I guess is where we are, is that they want us to have the holes here to be able to access these three screws. And so what I'm going to do is actually just poke up with my whatever screwdriver I can manage to the back side of this enough to make a mark so I can see where that hole is. And then I'm going to use my hobby knife and just poke through here and then cut out that hole. And these don't need to be perfectly neat looking, but I do try to make them as nice and circular as I can manage. It does appear that it's time for me to change the blade in this hobby knife. It's not as sharp as I would like. But there we go. So a decent little hole in there, so we'll be able to access the screw. I'm going to do that with the other two here before we continue on. All right, that'll do. I apologize as well if there's background noise today on the video. There's some sort of work truck outside my studio and it's making tons of noise. So if you're hearing that, my apologies. There's not much I can do about it, unfortunately. All right, so we're skipping all of these pages of the instructions that talk about installing the heater. We don't need to do any of those. Here on this page, though, we do need to install our screws, which are going to go through here, and we're going to then, I guess I need to, actually if these screws are going to go through those holes that I just cut, I'm going to need to make these holes a little bigger. So let's do that. All right, test this one real quick to make sure that that's a good size. Yes, it is. All right, so now I've got to do the same thing on the rest of these. All right, so that's looking better. And then we are going to deviate again a little bit from these instructions. The LDO kit, instead of coming with those washers and M3 nuts, or instead of asking for us to put those on here, they actually provided these little lock nuts. And so they want us to put these, to thread these on here with the flat side up, so that the flat side will be against the surface of our bed mount. And so what I'm going to do is thread these on here this way, and then tighten them down. And once I got that in place, these are a bit hard to thread on in reverse like they want us to do there. So I'm going to hold on to this thing with this pair of pliers and then thread it the rest of the way down. I think that'll be the best approach here. Yeah, that does seem like it's working. I'm again having trouble getting it on camera. And I can see that the camera is also having trouble focusing on it. So maybe our quality is a bit lacking in this video. I apologize. We got sound problems in the background. We got cameras not focusing. Just not my day, I guess. All right, and now they want us to tighten this down as tight as we can get it. The idea is, the reason there's a lock nut here is that we're going to be putting these thumb screws on from the underside of the bed, and we're going to be having to tighten those by hand, and so you want to make sure that this screw is not going to turn at all while you're adjusting the thumb screws. So that's looking good. I'm going to spare you the agony of having to watch me do that 2 more times. I will have to do it just because it has to be done, but you don't have to watch it. So I'm going to do the other 2 of these, and I'll meet you on the other side. All right, so here we are. I think I fixed the camera focus, and we've got these 3 screws now tightened down with these lock nuts, and everything is good. I think actually that was the hardest part of the build so far for me, was just getting those threaded on and then tightened down nice and tight. But it is all ready to go now, and I think we're ready to install this onto the printer. Now, in order to do that, what they want us to do is put these 3 springs onto those 3 screws that we just bolted into place, and then we're going to use the thumb screws from the underside of the bed holder to hold this down into place. Now, the LDO guide suggested that I print these little Kirigami bed spacers, and after doing a quick little test fit, I've decided I don't think that I want to use these. I'm not quite sure that I completely understand the orientation of how they're supposed to go. So if you have information on these and how they're supposed to be used, I didn't find any documentation anywhere or any pictures, let me know in the comments down below. I'm curious about those, but for me, I didn't see a good way to use them that would like make sense and actually I felt like help with anything, and so we're not going to use those. But what we are going to do is flip this over carefully so that these springs don't fall out. And I'm going to just route the wires out the sort of the back at this point. We can flip this over and plug them in underneath to this connection block once we're sure that everything is in place. So what I'm going to do is try to hold onto these springs and flip this over and get this aligned with the holes that it mounts into on the underside of the bed. That seems good. The other note, in the LDO guide, they did talk about the length of these screws. So if we look at, here I'll bring the instructions back up. On the instructions it says that we're supposed to be using M3 by 40s. In the LDO guide, they suggested that we switch to either M3 by 35s or 30s. I believe that I'm using M3 by 30s here. In fact, I'm pretty sure that that's what I'm doing, and they are definitely long enough to fit through here. And I've got all 3 of those thumb screws now threaded into place. So maybe we'll look at the underside here if we can. This is tough to do because of the camera angle, but I'll try to move this up as best I can here. And if we fish these wires down through here, there we go. So now coming out underneath our bed, we've got our 2 heater wires here, these red and white ones. And then we've got this JST connector for the bed thermistor. And all that we should have to do now is plug these in to the other sides of that connection block, right? So they make the connection down to the electronics compartment, down through our cable chain that we already ran. Just by connecting into this connection block down here. So again, in the future, if we need to service our bed or anything like that, it'll be easy to disconnect these 3 connections that I'm making right now. And when we do such a thing, then the bed will be completely disconnected and we'll be able to remove it or do whatever we want. Now, there are a couple of wires here. Like there's a little bit of excess on that wire. So what I will probably do, just to tidy that up, is to tuck it up underneath there and use one more cable tie on that to hold it up kind of out of the way. But once you get the printer flipped over, you can't see that anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten these thumb screws down a bit more. And obviously we'll be using these in the future to level the bed. But I can probably get it roughly level to start with here by just maybe tightening the thumb screws enough so that I can feel the end of the screw coming out through the hole in the thumb screw. That way I'm sure that they're all just about even. So that's what I'm going to do here. There's 2 of them done. And then this back corner over here. All right, that seems pretty close. Yeah. So all 3 of those are roughly the same length of screw into them, so that should be roughly level on the bed. And again, we will see once we get to the end of the build and we actually get this thing printing. But yeah, the vertical motion on the Z-axis seems real good. The cable chain, I'm just checking like its range of motion, so with all the way down it looks good, and we already checked with it all the way up. We're not in danger of having clearance issues with the X-axis moving above it. So yeah, I think we're good. All right, I think that's going to do it for today. This was simple in theory, but in practice, you know, threading some of those screws in place and whatever was a little bit tedious and kind of annoying. I'm glad that that part of the build is done, actually, because I wouldn't really ever want to do that again. So yeah, hopefully that's all good and in place, and we don't have to redo any of that in the future, just because it was a bit of kind of tedious, annoying work. But it did come out looking pretty good, I think. And we are ready for the next episode tomorrow, which I'm pretty sure will be the print head itself, the tool head. Let's go look and see. Yes, that is what is next in the instructions. And so, yep, that's what we'll do tomorrow. I will see you then. In the meantime, if you have questions, comments, concerns, if you know about those bed spacers and how they're supposed to fit into that whole setup that we just did there, let me know about those things, because I am curious about those spacers. I played with them a few different ways, and I wasn't happy with how things were fitting. So especially with this little printed part over here that was the cable guide, the spacer on that side didn't seem like it wanted to play well with that. So anyway, let me know if you know anything about those. I'm curious. Otherwise, all the rest of the references to things that we've used in this episode, as usual, will be down in the description. And so you can check those out if you're following along. And I will see you next time. Have a good one.